We're excited to have you all. And I think we're ready to pass it on. So here's one, my left one. Oh, and tofu. Yes, we'll do tofu too. Melissa will show you how to do tofu.
Oh, you might have to do that.
Tofu is, you basically will just be cutting it.
Yeah, slices. Yeah, okay. All right. Okay, hi everyone. It's good to be back. It seems like both times I've done this, it's been about 100 degrees. So it's just, I seem to bring the hot weather with me. And so we are really going to be in India today since we're all cooking in high heat. But it's not too spicy, so don't worry, everything will be fine. So the first thing we're going to do is, oh, someone just beeped. Is someone talking to me? We're good. Okay. First thing we're going to do is make the marinade for the fish or the chicken. So what you need is a kind of flat dish, this kind of shape. Oh, actually, before we start, one thing on the equipment list is I forgot to say that ideally, if we're going to need a food processor just to puree the garlic and the onions. So if you have that, we won't need it quite yet, but if you have one, just get that out. We'll need that a little bit later. So the first thing we're going to do is marinate the fish or the chicken. So you want a dish, kind of a flat dish like this, some kind of platter, something like that. And so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to make the marinade in the dish. And normally you would do this marinade like 2 hours before. So obviously it's just going to be marinating for like 15, 20 minutes, which is fine. But if you do this dish again, you can marinate it for 2-3 hours before. It's totally fine. And chicken even longer than that. So the first thing we're going to do is, the recipe says canola oil, but you can use any neutral, I'm going to use, what's the camera? Grapeseed oil. So you can use canola oil, grapeseed oil, safflower oil, any kind of neutral, not olive oil, because you want something that's more neutral than olive oil. So for the marinade, again, I'm just going to guess it. It doesn't have to be exact, but you want to start with about ½ a cup of canola oil. So I'm just going to put that in the bottom of my dish. And with all this Indian cooking, you don't have to be exact. So don't worry too much if you spill more or less of something in there. It's not a big deal. So first of all, you start with your oil. And then the recipe says cayenne. And Lynna and I both realized that we didn't have cayenne. So we're just going to use a different kind of, any kind of spicy pepper is fine. So we're going to use esplanade, which is just a different kind of spicy pepper. So, and we're going to add ½ a teaspoon. And again, if you like things really spicy, put a teaspoon in. But even ½ a teaspoon of cayenne is not going to make this too spicy, so don't worry. So I'm going to put a little bit more. So you've got your cayenne or esplanade, or if you don't have anything, you can put some chili powder in there. Anything that you have is fine. And then we are going to add 2 teaspoons of ground black mustard seeds. So if you manage to get hold of this, this is what the whole seeds look like. If you can see, looks a little bit like poppy seeds. And so that's what they look like whole. And I've ground some up. If you need to grind them up, you can either grind them in a spice grinder, or if you have a pestle and mortar, you can just put them in here and just crush them a little bit. They don't have to be super fine. And so this, I ground some up already. And this is what they look like ground up, because they're actually yellow in the inside. So when you grind them up, it looks more yellow. So we're going to put about 2 teaspoons of the ground mustard seed. Again, don't worry, it doesn't have to be exact. Not a big deal. And then what else are we going to put in there? We are going to add about ½ a tablespoon of salt. And again, salt, one of those things, if you like more salt, put in more. I'm going to put in a little bit more, but about ½ to 1 tablespoon of salt. Let's throw that in. Kosher salt if you have it. If you're using just fine table salt, slightly less, because that's stronger than kosher salt. And then the last ingredient, which some of you may not have been able to find, which is fine. This is fenugreek leaves. So this is what I got from Vic's, which is a fabulous Indian grocery store on 4th Street in Berkeley. They have an amazing restaurant. If you want takeout Indian, it's fantastic food. So this is fenugreek leaves. So that's what, this is what they look like. And you can also buy fenugreek powder. So I don't know if any of you have fenugreek powder. You can also use that instead. And if you don't have either of those, you can chop up some celery leaves because that's a similar flavor. So I'm going to put in about a teaspoon of these dried fenugreek leaves. Oil, oh, the canola oil is about half a cup. So this is a fenugreek leaves. I'm going to put a little bit more. So either add fenugreek leaves if you have this, about 3/4 of a teaspoon of fenugreek seed powder if you have that. And if you don't have either of those, about a tablespoon of chopped fresh celery leaves. And if you don't have any of those things, don't worry about it. Just don't add it. It'll taste fine without. So don't panic if you don't have anything else to add, because the other ingredients in there will give it a good enough flavor. So I need, once you've got all your spices and stuff in there, you're just going to stir that together just to mix everything around so everything is all mixed up. And then we're going to add our fish or our chicken. So I'm going to add the fish to this first, and then I'm going to show you how to prep the chicken, because we need to do something to the chicken before we put it into the marinade. So the first thing we're going to do is just put the fish into this marinade. So we're going to grab, okay. So depending what kind of fish you have, I have halibut. And what you want to do before you marinate your fish is just make sure that if you have a fish that has bones in, just feel along your fillets. So some of you might have cod or fillets of Dover sole. Before you put them in the marinade, it's not the end of the world if you do have bones, but just feel the fillets, and just because that's the easiest way to tell if there's bones. And you can either, if it's easy to pull them out, you can pull them out now, or you can just deal with that. Ideally, you do want to do that now because we're going to be putting breadcrumbs on them, so it's going to be hard to find the bones once they're actually cooked. And this halibut, that's why I like halibut. It doesn't have bones, so it's a really nice fish to cook with. And again, if you have fillets of sole, they shouldn't have any bones in. The only white fish that might have some is cod, but they're going to be probably big bones. So just double check, feel your fillets, and just see if there's any bones in there, and just try and pull them out with your fingers. And what you want to do with your fish fillets, make sure you cut them up. You see how big this is? It's like the size of the palm of my hand. When you're cooking fish, you don't want to be cooking huge pieces, because it's harder to get the cooking right, because you end up with the inside still being raw when the outsides are cooked. So if you've got big fillets, just cut them in half. It'll just be easy for you to get the cook time right, so that you don't end up with overcooked fish. So what I'm going to do is just place these fillets of fish in the marinade. And as I said, you can do this, up to 2 hours ahead for fish. And for chicken, you can marinate this the night before. They can sit in this for 24 hours, totally fine. All right. And again, if you've got really thick fillets, you see these are only about, let me show you the thickness. This is, at most it's maybe 3/4 of an inch thick. If you have really fat fillets, again, it's just, you're gonna have to cook it slower to make sure the middle is cooked before and the outside doesn't dry out. So we'll talk about that again when we're cooking it, just to make sure that you get the cook right. Okay. See this one here, I'll show you. See, this is a much fatter fillet. So I'm going to cut this in half so that when I come to cooking it, it's going to be easier to get the cook right on it. Same with this one. There we go. Now I'm cooking more here because I'm cooking for 2 families. So in case you think I'm cooking way more than you, that's why.
Is it okay?
Yes.
Is it okay if the fish overlaps in the marinade?
Yes, so I'll show you because mine's going to do that too. So what we want to do now, see, I've just found on this fillet here, I just felt it, see, as I put it in, and I felt there's a little bit of, it's either a bit of gristle or a tiny bit of bone. So I'm just going to cut that off. It's the best way to find fish bones is to feel for them because so they're very hard to see. So is to touch your fish for the bones. Okay, so now we've got them in there. So I'm going to flip them all over. You want to make sure that both sides are really covered in the marinade. So we're going to do this. And as you do this, just make sure that every fillet has some marinade on, and then it doesn't matter if they're overlapping. So again, get all sides. If you've got kind of fat fillets like that, make sure that all 4 sides have the marinade. And just kind of, the easiest way to do this is with your fingers. You can do it with tongs and stuff, but as long as your hands are clean, this is just the easiest way to do it. Okay.
Bones.
Sorry, what was that again?
How do you take out the fish bones?
Good question. And I wish I'd brought my tweezers. Do you have any tweezers? So I forgot to bring my fish tweezers because I had halibut, which doesn't have bones in, but I think Lynna might have some. So you can use any kind of tweezers. You can use your bathroom tweezers. So if you have tweezers in your bathroom or your first aid kit, you can just wash those off. And this is the best way to get fish bones out. And you can actually buy, if you cook fish a lot, you can buy special fish bone removing tweezers that actually are much wider than this. They have a very wide tip. And then it's just very easy to pull out the bone. If you don't have tweezers, you can try with if you have fingernails, just grab onto it. But tweezers is the best way to get. At a push, if you don't have tweezers, pliers would probably work. Again, if you wash them really well and just go to your toolbox and grab some pliers, that would be the other way to get out of the fish bones. So being in the kitchen, it's all about just, you got to kind of, I would say MacGyver it, but that's an old reference that only grown-ups will probably realize. You kids have never seen the show MacGyver, but use whatever tools that you have that will do the job. So anything that you think might work, like a pair of tweezers, is what you want to do. So that's the fish. So as I said, you can do that 2 hours ahead, chicken the night before. So we're just going to put that to one side. It doesn't need to go in the fridge because we're going to be cooking it pretty soon. And that's the other thing. If you're marinating for a short time and you want, normally this would be 2 hours. We're only going to do it for 15, 20 minutes. Leaving it out at room temperature is going to make the flavors absorb into the fish quicker. So when you put it in the fridge, it takes longer for the marinade flavors to get in. So the fact that we're already doing this for 20 minutes, it's fine to leave it out at room temperature. Yes. Not yet. No, we're not doing anything with the bay leaves yet. That's going to go in the sauce.
Do we leave skin side up or skin side down?
Oh, you don't want skin on these fillets.
Oh, okay.
So because we're going to be putting breadcrumbs on the top, so we want to take this. If you have skin, sorry, I should have said that before. If you have skin on your fish, you need to take the skin off before you put it in the marinade. So if you've already put it in, just scrape the marinade off with a knife off the skin side. And if there's a parent with you, get the parent to help you take the skin off. And I can kind of show you. Sorry, I'm just trying to think the best way to do this. So if you have a fillet, just pretend this has skin on. And I put this down here and the skin, pretend this is the skin. What you want to do is you get a knife and you just slip it under the edge of the skin. And then you slip it under and you pull the skin back with your hand and you just rub the knife like that. And again, it's probably something a parent should do. How many people have that problem? How many people have skin on their fish? Put up your hand if you have skin on your fish. Is it just one? Yeah. Okay, so what I'm going to do, if people need to take the skin off the fish, I'm just going to prep the chicken so you can work on your fish while I show you what to do with the chicken. And just ask me another question if you have any questions. All right, so I'm going to wash my hands and then we're going to, so for those of you who are doing chicken, again, we're doing the same thing with the chicken. We are going to be marinating it and putting the breadcrumbs on and frying it in the same way that we're going to do with the fish. So for the chicken, These are boneless. You need boneless chicken breasts. You could use boneless thighs as well, but I'm just going to show you what to do with the breast because we're using the breast. So when you're pan frying a chicken breast, if you pan fry it whole like this, it's going to get an uneven cook because this thin bit at this end is going to cook way before this fat bit at this end. So if you're using a chicken breast, what we're going to do is we're going to use a rolling pin to flatten it out to make it the same thickness the whole way, and then we're going to cut it in half because it's too big once you flattened it out. So you want to get a rolling pin, and what you don't want to do, you don't want to bash straight down. If you hit straight down, it kind of mushes the chicken and kind of mashes it away. So what you want to do is try and push it to the side. So I've got my thin bit here, which is the right thickness, and we want to get this side thinner. So I'm going to hold on to this side, and with the rolling pin, I'm going to hit quite hard and just kind of push the chicken breast to the side. So I'm kind of pushing down and sideways to the left towards the thicker end of the chicken breast. If you can see what I'm doing. So the goal is we want to try and get the whole thing the same thickness. See already we thickened it out. We need to do a little bit more. And if you've got chicken thighs, again, look at your chicken thighs. If they're slightly uneven, hit them a little bit just to even them up a little bit. So that looks good. And then I'm just gonna cut it in half because again, it's easier to cook this size of chicken. If you tried to cook this whole thing in one piece, it's much harder to get the cook right. And then these are going to go in, Lynna's made another marinade for me. So these are going to go in exactly the same marinade that we made for the fish. Which is going to go over there. So I'm just going to do one more chicken. Yeah, we'll do this one first. So this one. And again, sometimes with these, if you're doing chicken, sometimes these chicken breasts come with a chicken tender that's kind of almost separated from the breast. And if that's the case, you just want to cut that off and just cook that separately. So again, I'm just going to cut this. There we go. So again, just push it slightly to the side rather than straight down so that you don't end up really just mashing the meat away. And this is just going to make it easier to cook if it's all the same thickness. And again, I'm just going to cut that one in half. So these are just going to go in the marinade exactly the same as the fish. All right, thank you. So now, while that's marinating, we're going to start making our sauce. And I've got raw chicken on my board. So now I need to wash my board and my knife before I'm going to get, Lynna's very kindly got me a fresh board. Thank you. This is so much nicer than being at home. I get people giving me clean things to use. All right. So your fish and your chicken are marinating. So now we're going to start making the sauce. So the first thing we need for that is 3 tablespoons of chopped garlic. And I'm going to chop mine in the food processor. You can either do that or you can do it by hand with a knife, whichever you prefer. So let me just grab a knife. There we go. So I'm just going to take the skin off all these garlic cloves and throw them in the food processor, and we're going to chop up. We want about 3 tablespoons of chopped garlic. And again, with Indian cooking, it doesn't have to be exact. And if you don't like garlic, just put less garlic and more onion. And again, with the spices, if there's a spice that you particularly like or don't like, you can substitute. You can kind of add more cumin than coriander, or the other way around, or more spice, you know, more cayenne or less cayenne, depending on the spice. And sorry, they're moving cameras around. And the key to Indian cooking, so everyone just keep working on your garlic, because you're going to need 3 tablespoons of chopped garlic, which is quite a lot. So just work on peeling all your garlic cloves, and you can either chop them by hand or stick them in the food processor. And okay, sorry, we're just trying to play with the camera angle. And it doesn't matter if you chop it by hand or however you want to do it, it's fine. So I'm just throwing that in there. Yeah, so the key to Indian cooking is you cook in layers, which means that you cook each ingredient. When you're making a curry sauce like we're doing now, you cook each ingredient separately and in a certain order, one after the other. And it makes a huge difference in how it tastes. See, that garlic clove is rotten, so I'm not going to use that one. Because if you just, all the ingredients that we're going to put together in this sauce, if you just put them all in the pot at the same time and cooked it, it would come out totally different. It would not taste like it's going to taste. So Indian cooking is interesting in that way, that it's all about cooking things, spices, usually onion, ginger, garlic are the main things, and tomatoes. And you cook it slowly and in layers. So one thing has to cook first, and then you add the next one and the next one. And that's what builds up your flavors. And you'll also notice when we start cooking it, there's quite a lot of oil in a curry sauce. Either oil, or the other thing you use making a curry sauce is ghee, which is clarified butter, which is butter that's melted to take out the impurities, so you can cook it like you would use oil, because you can cook it to a higher temperature. And it's actually quite healthy for you. It's not as bad as regular butter. All right, so we're going to keep working on the garlic. You can work it by hand. And this recipe comes from a cookbook from a restaurant, which I'll show you. This is a restaurant in, is that upside down? No. You can see that, called Vidges, which is in Vancouver, which if we're ever allowed to travel again, and if you ever go to Vancouver, it's a great restaurant. It's a family couple who started this restaurant, I think about 12 years ago. And it's really, when I started cooking, I never cooked Indian food because I grew up eating bland English food, and I always thought that Indian food was going to be too spicy and I wouldn't like it. The food at this restaurant is, and I think Indian has that reputation of just being really spicy, and that's so not the case. And all the food and all the restaurants in this, all the recipes in this book are just, I would say, more fragrant than hot spicy. So they're just really delicate flavors and kind of interesting flavors. And if you like Indian food, I would recommend this book because it's got some really interesting, he sort of uses, combines traditional kind of Indian recipes from his grandparents and parents and kind of modernize them a little bit, you know, with his kind of spin on traditional ways of cooking. And it's just, and this sauce, if you're just cooking for 4 people, it makes enough for 2 meals, and it freezes really well. So you can make this sauce, you could make a double batch and just stick it in pots in the freezer, and then you can just defrost it, and you've got a really instant dinner because you just fry some fish or chicken or tofu or vegetables, you know, just roast some vegetables and put this sauce over the top, and it's really tasty. That's the other thing I like about Indian food, is that most of it freezes really well. So I always make double what I need and put half in the freezer, and then you've got a meal instantly when you don't feel like cooking. All right, so that is most of my garlic. One more. Okay. All right, so I'm just gonna tidy this away. All right, so now we're just going to chop the garlic. which is not my machine, so hopefully I know how to use it. Can you see that? All right, so now we're going to start cooking the sauce. We're going to start the garlic first, and then while that's cooking, we're going to chop the onions and the tomatoes, which we're going to add later on. So the key when making the sauce, and especially when you're cooking garlic, is cook it really slowly, because garlic, if it starts to go dark brown, it gets bitter, and that's going to affect the taste of the sauce. You can't go back from that. If you end up burning your garlic, you're going to need to throw it out and start again, because there's no way to come back from burnt garlic. Do you have a question? No? Okay. Sorry, we're just trying to get our camera on the pan. 1 second. Our production engineers are just working on this. Hold on 1 second. It's working, isn't it? Okay, how do I turn this ring on? Oh, that one. Okay, have it on nice and low. Okay, great. Okay, so now we got the pot. So we're going to add, again, I'm going to guess, but if you want to measure, you want ½ cup of canola oil. So it's about ½ cup. I'm going to do a little bit more because I'm going to make a little extra sauce. But you want ½ cup of canola oil. And right now you can have it on like a medium heat, because you just want to heat that oil up. And the first thing you're going to add to your oil, actually before the garlic, sorry, your question? Yes, I will. So the first thing we're going to add to the oil, you can let it heat up a little bit, not till it's smoking. You just want it warm. And we're going to add the fresh curry leaves. So this is what they look like. Now, if you didn't manage to find fresh curry leaves, which is not always easy to find, instead of these, you can use about 3 bay leaves. So not this many, you just want 3 bay leaves. And also, if you have it, but don't worry if you don't, a strip of lime zest. So if you have a lime and you just want to cut a strip of zest off the lime, about the same. So if you've got ghee instead of oil, if you have oil, that would be better for this recipe. But if you have ghee, 4 tablespoons probably, maybe 5 tablespoons of ghee if you have that instead. So you've got your curry leaves, or if you don't have the curry leaves, 2 or 3 bay leaves, depending on how big they are, and a strip of lime zest. And that's what we're going to put into the pot first. So we've got our oil, which is, yeah. Any more questions? Are we there? Okay, so we've got our oil heating up. And what you want to be really careful about is when you put these curry leaves into the oil, and the same if you have fresh bay leaves, they have some water in, so they're going to spit at you. So if you have a parent there, the parent might want to do this, or just be very careful when you put these. If you put anything in oil that has moisture in, it can spit at you a little bit. So I'm going to put these curry leaves in. You see, can you see that? I don't know if you can hear that and see that it's spitting at me. So I'm going to turn the heat down. And it's supposed to do that, so don't worry. As long as you're prepared and just stand back a little bit. So you want these leaves just to cook for about 30 seconds, just till they wilt just a tiny bit. And then we're going to add the garlic. So, Lynna, do you have a little spatula? I can scrape this out. Okay. So then I'm going to add about 3 tablespoons of the chopped garlic. I'm going to put that in. You want to get your garlic in there and turn your heat down as low as it can go, because you do not want this garlic to even barely brown. You just want it to cook very slowly. So the slower the better. So put it on your smallest ring at the lowest setting. So you want to cook this really, really slowly. Lynna, can we move it to a lower? This ring is going to be too high. Sorry. Sorry, we're going to need to move to a different ring, because if I left it on that ring, it's a really powerful burner and it would burn the sauce before it's ready to cook. Yeah. We're going to move back. Okay, so we'll just move the camera. 1 second. That's okay. Uh-oh. Sorry, guys. All right, there we go. So there's our pan. So yes, I saw that question about the lime zest. You want to put the lime zest and the bay leaves in before the garlic. And we're just going to stir this a little bit so it doesn't stick to the bottom. But once you've stirred it and it's on a nice low heat, you can leave it while you puree your onions, which is the thing we're going to add next. And just keep one eye on it. And if when you're cooking, if you see the garlic start to brown a little bit, just pull it off the heat. Take it or turn the heat off until we're ready to add the onions. So it's okay if you stop. You just don't want it going brown. So if you can leave it cooking slowly so it's not browning, that's fine. If you see it start to brown, just turn the heat off until we're ready to add the onions. Just keep an eye on it so that it cooks very slowly, because the slower you cook garlic, the sweeter it gets. So garlic, if it's cooked quickly, it's a stronger flavor, and it can also get very bitter if it gets too brown. So the key to cooking it slowly like this is to get the sweetness of the garlic rather than the sort of sharpness and the bitterness. So let that just keep cooking nice and slowly, and give it a stir occasionally, depending on what kind of pot you're using. If it's sticking to the bottom, just use a wooden spoon just to kind of keep it from sticking to the bottom of the pot like that. And then to that, we need to add a cup of pureed onions. Now, if you don't have the easiest way to do that is just to do it in a food processor and cut them, just puree it into, so it's almost a liquid. And again, that just gives you a nice texture. If you don't have a food processor to do this with, you can just chop them up as fine as you can, and that's going to taste fine. It'll just have a slightly different texture. So it's totally okay to do that. So you want about a cup of pureed onions, which will be about 2 small onions or 1 big one. Are we okay? Okay. So Lynna is keeping an eye on the garlic for me. Okay. Sorry, our production engineers are moving the cameras around, so hopefully you can see what we're doing. What happened? Are we good? Not much. This is the last time, so I don't need it. It's fine. No, it's fine. I'm just pureeing onions, and I'll just show people what it looks like. So it's fine. We don't need to move the camera. All right. So you can either chop your onions finely by hand or puree them in a food processor. And I'm still, while I'm doing this, just keeping an eye on the garlic. Starting to brown just a tiny bit. So I'm going to pull mine just slightly off the heat, just while I get the onions ready. And especially if you're using, like I'm using this Dutch oven, a heavy bottom pan, it keeps its heat so well that it keeps cooking. So even when you pull it off the heat, it still keeps cooking a little bit. So I'm just going to pull mine off the heat until I finish the onions and I'm ready to add those. So I'm going to add the onions to, I think I'm probably going to need to cut these, do these in 2 batches. All right. Might need the other one, Lynna. All right. So, Lena, can we chop these in the bigger food processor? This isn't working. Yeah. All right, we're just going to need to do this in a different way. 1 second. Okay, see this? I was trying to. You just use one and the small one, but it's not going to puree it. It's not strong enough to puree these, so we're just going to move these to a slightly bigger one. Okay, so Lena's going to do that for me. Just put that in there. Okay, great. Okay, so if everyone, once you've pureed your onions, we're going to add those to the garlic. So if you see in the pan, you want your garlic to be, you see it's slightly golden brown, which is perfect. That's just how you want it. And again, try and keep it from sticking. And then we're going to add our cup of pureed onion. And you see, by pureeing it instead of chopping it, you've got it, it's a much more kind of liquid texture. It's just going to affect the texture of the sauce. Okay. All right, yes, the onions. So we're going to put onions in there. There we go. Great, wonderful. Okay, so once you've added your onions, stir it in so that you get it nice and mixed with the garlic and your bay leaves, whatever you have there. Okay. All right. Turn the heat up a little bit. Okay, so that is going to cook for about 3 or 4 minutes while we chop the tomatoes, which is what we're going to add next. So once you've got your onions mixed in, it's your second layer. Just let that cook slowly. Again, keep an eye on it, and if it looks like it's browning too much, just turn the heat down. But if you have it on a low heat, that should be fine. So the thing we're going to add next is about a pound of finely chopped tomatoes. So you can, this time of year is tomato season. So hopefully you've got some good ones. If you haven't, it's totally fine to use canned, because you can get really good quality canned. I usually use, let me show you, like at other times of the year when it's not tomato season, I use these Marzano crushed tomatoes, which have much better flavor than if you're using tomatoes out of season. They taste of nothing, so you're much better off using these canned ones. But at this time of year, it should be, you know, the fresh ones are good, but other times of the year I would use this because it's you'll get a much better flavor. Thank you very much. So what we're going to do is just chop up about a pound of tomatoes. And again, it doesn't have to be exact, not a big deal. You see, these are really nice and ripe, so they're going to break down really quickly. The other problem with using tomatoes outside of season, often they're not ripe and they're really hard and they take much longer to cook because you have to cook them for much longer to break down, and they're not sweet. Oh, thank you, Lynna. So we're just going to chop these and put those in there. So while I'm doing that, I'm just keeping an eye on my onions and garlic, which is cooking away nicely. So the water from the onions is going to be evaporating a little bit. So just move it around. Don't let it brown too much. It can brown a little bit, but not too much. So we're just going to keep going. So just chop up your tomatoes. And again, if they're really ripe, you don't have to chop them that finely because they're going to break down by themselves anyway. See, these are really nice. Good ripe. And if you're in a hurry, just use the canned ones. It's quicker. The flavor is just as good. So don't ever think that you shouldn't. Canned tomatoes is one of those things that's totally fine to use. The onions are on a pretty low heat. I've got it on my lowest heat because you don't want it browning too much. because again, if you brown the onions and the garlic, you're going to get this bitter flavor, which is very hard to get out once that's happened. So just when in doubt, just when you're cooking the onions and the garlic, as low as possible. And if it takes a bit longer, that's fine. Okay. Which for tomatoes? Diced, like the crushed canned tomatoes, if you have that. But if you only have a puree, that's fine too. It'll just make a slightly different texture, but the flavor will be the same. So whichever you have is fine. No, so that's too much. So let me see.
Less than 28 ounces if you're using cans.
Yeah, if you're using a can, yeah, so this is a large can. So this is 1 pound, 12 ounces, and you only want a pound of tomatoes. So about just slightly over half a can if you're using one of these big cans. So whichever, a pound of canned or a pound of fresh. But again, these recipes are really forgiving. So if you do a little, you don't have enough or too much, it's fine. All right. See, I may not need all of these. All right, so Lynna's stirring that onion. And with the onion and the garlic right now, you want a lot of that water to start to evaporate. Maybe a couple more. Okay. All right. Okay, so I think that's going to be enough. All right. Okay, so now I'm just going to check on how the onions are looking. Okay. All right, so you can see, if you can see, there was more liquid in here and a lot of that liquid is evaporated. I'm going to turn the heat up just a touch, just to get a little bit more of that liquid out before I add the tomatoes. And then, okay. All right, so actually before we add the tomatoes, so is everyone, give you a few more minutes just to chop your tomatoes up if you've got those ready. And before we add the tomatoes, we're going to add the spices and then we're going to add the tomatoes last. So turn my heat down low again. So if you're ready to add the spices, we're going to add the spices next to the onions and the garlic that's in the pan. So the first thing we're going to add is, I've got my measuring spoon, 1 tablespoon of ground cumin. And again, if you like cumin, add a little bit more. So 1 tablespoon of cumin is going to go in there. I'll put that in. So 1 tablespoon of cumin. Again, I have an English accent, so I might be saying this differently than how you guys say it. 1 tablespoon of ground coriander. Add that in. And 1 tablespoon and 1 teaspoon of salt. So 1 tablespoon of salt plus 1 teaspoon and a half. That's a half. So it's a half teaspoon and 1 teaspoon of salt. And half a teaspoon of cayenne or whatever other pepper that you have. Where's that esplanade gone that we had? Oh, we found the cayenne. So half a teaspoon of cayenne. So again, if you like things spicy, add a little bit more cayenne, but half a teaspoon will give you a good flavor, not too spicy. So half a teaspoon of cayenne, and then about a quarter teaspoon of ground cloves. So this is a half teaspoon. It's about a quarter teaspoon of ground cloves in there as well. So what I've just added to the onion and the garlic, I've added 1 tablespoon of ground cumin, 1 tablespoon of ground coriander, 1 tablespoon plus 1 teaspoon of salt, and half a teaspoon of cayenne pepper, and a quarter teaspoon of ground cloves. So once you've got that all in there, you want to give that a stir. And again, this is the Indian cooking. It's all about layers. So we've added the garlic, cooked that. Then we add the onions and we cook that for a little bit. And now we're adding the spices, and we're going to cook the spices a little bit to bring out their flavor before we add the tomatoes to it. And this makes a big difference. If you just chuck everything in this pot together, it's just not going to taste the same. Okay, any more questions?
The recipe says whole cloves.
You can either add ground cloves or whole cloves. So if ground cloves, a quarter teaspoon, or whole cloves, about 6 whole ones. The only issue with the whole cloves is that obviously you don't want to eat those. So as you're serving the sauce, you kind of, or as you're eating it, you just fish out the cloves so that you don't swallow them. So you can do either. Traditional Indian, this recipe does call for whole cloves because that's traditionally what you would do, and you just avoid them while you're eating the dish. But I use ground cloves because I just can't be bothered to fish out the whole cloves at the end of it. But you can do either. Either way is totally fine. Okay. So I've just cooked these spices for about a minute, and now I'm going to add that pound of chopped tomatoes. So either fresh or canned, either is completely fine. So we're just going to put those in. Let me see. You know what? I'm just going to cut up a couple more. I think I need a couple more in there. And again, you know, when you make these dishes, you can adjust the seasoning. You know, if you like it more tomatoey, just add more. If you like more cumin or coriander, add more. Once you make it a couple of times, you can play around with it and just make it how you like. And particularly the cayenne. So if you like something more spicy, just double the cayenne pepper. And then the other thing to remember with, if you're making any kind of curry sauce or soup, if you end up making it too spicy, you can fix it. So if you put too much spice and you taste it and you're like, oh, this is way too hot for me, you can you add dairy to it. So you either add yogurt or coconut milk or some kind of acid like lime juice and sugar also. So all those things can help reduce the heat of spice. So if you've made it too spicy, add dairy, coconut milk, yogurt, some lemon juice, or a little bit of sugar. Not too much sugar because that can affect the whole taste of the dish. All right, so once you've got your tomatoes in there, thank you. We're going to let that cook for about 5 minutes. So what you want to do now is you don't want to stir it. Once you've got your tomatoes mixed in there, leave it alone. I'll explain why in 1 minute. So you're going to you might turn your heat up. You want it to be bubbling. So can you see the pan? Oh, I know. So I don't know if you can see, you want it to be bubbling a little bit, but not so it's getting burned at the bottom of the pan. So I've still got mine on the lowest heat. And we're going to leave this to cook for about 5 minutes. And what you want to do, you want to wait until the water evaporates, and you're going to see the oil rise to the surface and sort of start glistening a little bit on the surface. So just don't stir it, just let it sit for like 5 minutes. And for the water from the tomatoes to evaporate and the oil to come to the surface. So I'm going to turn my heat up just a touch. There we go. And that's going to be about 5 minutes. So while we're waiting for that, let's get our rice on. So we're going to you could, ideally this should be served with basmati rice, traditional rice with Indian food. But if you don't have basmati rice, that's fine. You can use any long grain, probably not short grain rice because that's going to be pretty sticky. But jasmine rice, long grain rice, and any kind of, but if you only have short grain, that's fine. So if you want to cook your rice, if you have a rice cooker and you're used to using a rice cooker, put it in your rice cooker now. But I'm just going to show you how, if you don't have a rice cooker, how to cook rice just in a regular pot. So yeah, I'll just do it here. It's very easy. You just need a heavy bottom pot with a tight fitting lid. And it's basically double the water to the rice. So I'm going to cook 2 cups of rice. So I need 4 cups of water. So I'm just going to put 4 cups in my pot. 1, 2, 3, and 4. And I'm going to put some salt in there. Again, this is just to taste. Some people don't like rice with any salt in, so it's completely up to you. I'm going to put about a tablespoon of salt in mine. And I'm going to put that on a high heat and bring it to the boil before I add the rice. So I'm going to bring my water to the boil. Then I'm going to, once it's boiling, I'm going to add 2 cups of rice, turn the heat down to the lowest setting and cook it for about 18 minutes until it's cooked. And again, it depends what kind of rice you're using. Some rice, jasmine rice, might cook at a slightly different speed than basmati rice or long grain rice. So just keep an eye on it. But between 15 and 20 minutes is usually what I would say. So I'm just going to put this. Lena, do you have a lid for this one? Oh, there we go. Great. Okay. Okay. So I'm going to turn that on high. And then, so if you can see, I don't know if you can see in this pot behind, what I was talking about has started to happen. You see the steam coming off, the water is evaporating from the tomatoes and the oil that's in there is coming to the surface. So it's almost ready. And with the last thing we're going to add to that is water and coconut milk. So what I have, we're going to add to this 3 cups of water and 1 cup of coconut milk. So if you have your coconut milk, I just want to show you. Oh, okay. Do you have the can? Oh, okay, you're not using can. So I just want to talk about coconut milk for a second. We're using from a carton this, or you might have a can. The key with coconut milk is that you need to shake it before you measure out your cup, because especially if you're opening a can, it splits. So you get the thickness at the top and the watery stuff at the bottom. So whatever you're using, carton or a can, give it a good shake before you open it. And when you pour out your cup, so here we've got a cup of coconut milk, just make sure it's really well mixed so you're not getting just the thick bit or just the thin bit, because otherwise it's going to affect the flavor and the texture of the sauce. And again, so we're looking for, is this 3 cups? Yeah, 3 cups of water and 1 cup of coconut milk to add to that sauce. But again, if you prefer it to be slightly richer, so if you really like coconut milk, you can change the proportion. So you could do half and half. You could do 2 cups of water to 2 cups of coconut milk. But you just need 4 cups of liquid in total. So no, I'm making this with 3 cups of water and 1 cup of coconut milk, but you can play around with that. Make it this way today. And if you want to make it again, just play around with it. So I'm going to go back to my sauce, and that looks great. So a lot of the water's come away. So now when I stir, you can see coming into the bottom of the pot, a lot of that water's gone away. So those flavors have got nice and intense. And now we're going to add your water and the coconut milk in there like that. Okay. And then we're just going to stir that and bring that to the boil. So once you've got that liquid in there, it's going to take, I'm just going to turn up the heat and get that boiling. And then once that's it, that's your sauce. So what you're going to do is once it's brought to the boil, you want to cover it. So you want to put a lid on it and turn it down back to the lower setting again and let it simmer for about 15 minutes, 15 to 20 minutes, and then it's ready. So we're just going to wait for this to boil and then turn the heat down to low. So just, you can have the heat on high right now to get it to bring it up to the boil, and just keep stirring it so that you make sure you've got all that. If there's any onion or garlic that's stuck to the bottom, just scrape that off now, which you should be able to do. Now you've got lots of liquid in there. You can scrape that. So we're going to cook this. So when we bring it to the boil, we're going to put a lid on it, simmer it for about 15 or 20 minutes while we get the fish and the chicken ready. And then we'll taste it at the end. So, because if we tasted it now, it's going to taste different because it needs that 15 to 20 minutes for all the flavors to kind of cook together. And then just before we finish, we're going to taste it and add more salt if it needs it. So we're just going to let that come to the boil. Okay. And then keep an eye, your rice water might be boiling. Yeah, see while I'm waiting for that to boil, I'm just going to add my rice next door. You can see that. Okay, great, thank you. So I'm going to add my 2 cups of rice. There we go. Okay, so I'm just going to stir that rice in. Okay. Yeah, so for the regular recipe that we're all making, it's 4 cups of liquid, 3 water, 1 coconut milk. If you're doubling it, which you shouldn't need to because this is making double the amount anyway, but if you are, you're going to need 6 water and 2 coconut milk. Okay, so now I've got my rice on low. I'm going to put the lid back on, and that we'll set a timer for, let's check it up to 18 minutes. I'm going to move it to a lower. Okay, great. Great. Thank you.
Okay, 18 minutes.
So, but you can totally use your rice cooker if you'd rather do that, whichever way you're most comfortable. Yeah, we need to boil some water for the peas next. So I'm still waiting for this sauce to boil. I've got it on high. And as soon as this has come to the boil, I'm going to stick the lid on and let it cook for like 15, 20 minutes. So this is going to be ready. We're going to spend the next 15 minutes breading the chicken and or fish, cooking that. And by the time that's cooked, your sauce is going to be all ready. And your rice should be cooking now too. So that should be ready at about the same time, about 15 minutes. So while we're waiting for that so we've got our sauce. If it's not boiling, you're waiting for it to boil, and then we're going to put a lid on and just let it cook, simmer slowly at a low heat for 15 minutes. And your rice should be cooking. And we want to put another pan of water on for your peas, because the vegetable is just going to be frozen green peas with fresh mint with it. So if you want to, on another burner, just put a medium pot of water on to boil to cook your peas in. So just put that one on now. Or you can also just cook peas in the microwave. Just use a glass bowl, fill it up with water and put the peas in and cook them for like 5 minutes in the microwave. So whichever you prefer to do. So my sauce is just beginning to boil. It's just all right, so that's come to the boil. So I'm going to get my lid, which has disappeared. There it is. All right, so I put my lid on the pot with the sauce, and that's just going to cook away for about 15 minutes. So that's all ready to go. Turn that down. Okay, so your sauce is cooking. It's done basically. Your rice is cooking. Your water's on for your peas. And now we're going to bread the fish and the chicken and get ready to fry that. So let me get our fish back. Okay. All right. So we've got our fillets of fish and or chicken. Just so you can see. So that's the chicken. And if you have tofu, again, it's just done in exactly the same way. So if you've got your tofu slices in your marinade, we're just going to bread them in exactly the same way. And so you can use, I'll show you what we're going to use. You can either use fine breadcrumbs. This is panko that I just chopped up. You can use panko just plain as it is. I've actually just put this in the food processor to make it a little bit finer. But you can just, either is fine, whichever you like it. Just regular panko, you can chop it up finer. You can use fine breadcrumbs. You can use, there's a gluten-free substitute you can buy, so if you can't eat bread. And if you don't want to do the breadcrumbs and you just want to fry it without breadcrumbs, you can do that too. So whichever you prefer. So I am gonna start with the fish. Lynna's gonna do the chicken. And I'm just gonna breadcrumb the fish. Can I have a couple of forks? All right, thank you. So when you're putting breadcrumbs on fish or chicken or whatever, if you use your fingers, you can end up with huge big balls of breadcrumbs all over your fingers as your fingers get liquid on and it gets really messy. So I usually try and do this with 2 forks. But before I put them in breadcrumbs, I'm just going to turn them over one more time just to absorb a little bit more of that marinade. Just kind of flip it over so we get all that nice, tasty seasoning on there. So just flip them all over. And then you've got all that good flavor in there. All right, and then we're just gonna coat them in the breadcrumbs. And you see, you can use your forks just to kind of scoop the breadcrumbs or the panko onto it. It doesn't need to be a thick layer, just a little bit is fine. And then shake off the excess so that you know I've got too much. And then if you can see, once I've put the breadcrumbs on, I'm just gonna lay them here on a baking sheet next to me so that then I'm ready to cook them all. So I'm just gonna do all my fillets like that and get the breadcrumbs on. Okay. And again, if you don't want to do it this way, you know, if you don't want it, we're going to fry these. And if you don't want to do that and you want to be a little bit healthier, you could just bake these fillets like they are right now. You could bake those in the oven and do it that way. Same with the chicken, whichever you prefer. If you have a grill and you'd rather grill them, you could do that too. Because this sauce you can basically do with anything and just cook your protein however you like. This is just one way to do it. I'm gonna do that. Okay. And then so we're going to be frying these in a non-stick skillet in a little bit of, again, neutral oil, grapeseed, canola oil. And if you're doing fish and chicken, your chicken is going to take longer to cook, and it's also more forgiving. You can, if I were you, I would cook the chicken first, and then just put that to keep warm in a low oven while you cook the fish. Because cooked chicken you can leave sitting around for a little bit and it's not going to dry out. Fish is harder to do that with, especially halibut, which can dry out pretty quickly. So if you're doing both, I would just do your chicken first. And the chicken is going to take a little longer to cook, probably than the fish, depending on how thick your fish fillets are. And the cooking time is going to completely depend on how big your fillets are. Say this one, for instance, this is the tail end. It's very thin, and this is going to cook maybe 1.5 minutes each side, 2 minutes. Whereas this one, you can see this is a lot fatter. This is going to take more like, 3 to 4 minutes each side. So the cooking time, you're going to have to judge for yourself depending on how thick your fillets are once we get them in the pan. And the thicker they are, you're going to want a slightly lower heat because you want to make sure that the middle is cooked through before the outside dries out. And if you have it on a very high heat, you're going to end up with raw in the middle and dried out on the outside. But fish, a lot of people are scared of cooking fish. It's really not that hard. And when in doubt, take fish out before you think it's ready, because fish continues cooking a little bit. And if you then cut into it and it's not quite cooked through, you can just throw it back in the pan. And it's much easier to fix undercooked fish. Once fish is overcooked and kind of dried out, there's not much you can do about it. Although in this case, you've got a yummy sauce that you can just throw over the top, so it's fine. All right. Okay, so just keep putting all the breadcrumbs on your fillets. There we go. And again, if you have slightly different sizes, if you've got some that are thicker than others, you want to put your thicker fillets in the pan first for like 1 minute or 2, and then add the thin ones so that everything ends up cooking about the same time. There we go. And once we start cooking this, I'll show you a trick to tell how fish is cooked that I learned once years ago, and it seems strange, but it actually works, because I was never sure. I kept cutting open my fish to see if it was cooked, because it was the only way I knew how. All right. And again, you can use your fingers to do this. It can get messy, because you end up getting breadcrumbs all over your fingers. There we go. Just a couple more. So again, as you finish up, just get the rest of this marinade out, so you're getting all that nice flavor. All right, so last one. And then we're just going to do one thing before we start cooking these, because especially if you have just these thin fish, it's going to take 2 to 4 minutes maybe to cook them, not long at all. So before you start cooking, especially if you have thin fish, just take a pause and make sure that we need to make sure that the peas and the rice are going to be ready, and that your sauce. So let's just all take a pause. So I've got those ready there. I'm just going to put this to one side, and there's one more thing we need to do before we start cooking. Okay, all right. So right now I'm going to check on my sauce, and just check on your sauce. It should be simmering, not boiling really hard, just simmering, and just give it a quick stir to make sure that it's not sticking to the bottom. Mine is fine. So that's looking good, and it's smelling better already. It's amazing how quickly those flavors. So you should be getting a good smell from that already. So I'm just going to put the lid back on that. And then my water for my peas is boiling. The rice is cooking. Our rice timer has 6 minutes left, so that we're about right for that. So the one thing we're going to do before we start cooking is, so the peas, we're just going to boil the peas and then drain them and toss them with a little bit of salt and pepper, butter if you want, but you don't have to. And we're going to put some fresh mint on there. So I'm just going to chop that mint now, so that we're not doing that at the last minute. So this is nice fresh mint that we got from our garden, which is yummy. If you have even tiny bit of ground anywhere, a pot. Fresh mint is one of the easiest things to grow. It grows like a weed. And if you use mint a lot in cooking, just buy a little plant next time you're at the hardware store, and it's super easy to grow in a pot anywhere. That and thyme are the two things, and rosemary too, very easy to grow. And there's something really nice about going out into your backyard or just on the deck and picking your herbs from a pot rather than buying them from the store. Just feels really good. All right. So again, how much mint you want? Again, if you don't like mint, don't put this in. But it's just it adds a nice freshness to the peas. If you like it. And mint is one of those, some herbs you can, sorry, Lena, thank you. Some herbs you can chop ahead of time, like parsley, thyme. If you know you're going to be cooking, you can chop those up hours before and put them in the fridge and wrap them up, and they stay and they're good. Fresh mint tends to go black, and same with basil, or basil, I think you guys call it. Sorry, I know, I call it basil. So if for things like mint is one of those two that you just want to chop it up just before you're going to use it. Otherwise it can go black and not very nice. Yeah. So just chop that up again as fine as you like it. If you don't want it to have it pretty coarse. All right. So if you don't want to multitask, which you might not want to, you might want to cook your peas now, or just put them in the water to cook. And then we can just drain them and let them steam in the pan while we wait for everything else to be ready. So maybe that would be a good idea to do now, because we'll just put the peas in. So we're just focusing on cooking our fish and chicken at the end. So your mint you can just leave there, and we're just going to toss that into the peas at the end. So let's add our peas. And again, I was having this discussion with my kids the other day, who was saying, oh, frozen, why would you use frozen anything? And peas is one of those vegetables that frozen peas are actually better, 99% of the time, are better than the fresh ones when they're in season that you buy in the store. Because peas, as soon as you pick them, get really starchy, even within a day, and they're not nearly as sweet. So unless you're growing your own peas and they're literally coming straight out of your garden onto your table, frozen peas are actually a better texture and sweeter than the fresh ones, the English peas that you can buy in the store, because even if they've sat around for a couple of days, they just don't taste as good. So I'm just going to pop those in there. Oh, there we go. All right. Okay, so those are going to cook while we start doing the fish. So Lena, do you want to do the chicken and I'll do the fish? So Lena's going to cook our chicken and I'm going to cook the fish. Yeah, I'll do that one. Okay, great. Okay, so there we go. So I'm going to put my heat on about a medium heat, and I'm going to use, again, the same grapeseed oil. There we go. So you want, yeah, kind of medium heat, not too high. If the heat's too high, you're going to burn the breadcrumbs before the chicken or the fish is cooked in the middle. And if you're cooking chicken, it's going to take longer to cook than the fish. So again, the chicken, you may need to turn down the heat if it looks like it's getting too brown. And chicken, how to tell if that is cooked. If you have a thermometer, about 160 to 165 is the internal temperature for chicken. If you flattened out that chicken breast like I did, it's probably going to be, depending on the size, about 3 to 4 minutes each side, depending on the heat. So you're going to have to judge that a little bit yourself. So with the chicken, 3 to 4 minutes each side. If the breadcrumbs start to burn, just turn the heat down. And for the chicken, with the temperature about 160 to 165. And with the fish, again, depending on the thickness of your fillets, you're probably looking at only 2 to 3 minutes each side. And I've just seen that my timer for my rice is almost done. So before I put my fish in, I'm just going to check. Lynna's, you want to check? Let's check the rice. I'll taste my rice. There we go. Yep, that rice is ready. So I'm going to just turn the heat off, leave the lid on, and that'll be fine for 5 or 10 minutes. Just can stay there. So I don't know if you can see in this pan, I put up too much oil in here, and that would make the fish greasy. So I'm just going to pour off that excess oil. You don't want to have a puddle of oil. You just want it to be coating the pan. So if you've done like me, I'll show you here. You see I've got too much oil. It's kind of puddling at the side. You don't want that because then it's going to make it greasy. So I'm just going to pour that oil because we're going to need it because I'm going to cook in batches. So I'm just going to pour that off. So what I got left in my pan, this is a nice non-stick pan. You don't need a lot of oil. So just like a thin layer, not a big pool of oil. So stick that. It depends what kind of pan you have. If you've got a pan that's not such a great non-stick, you may need a little bit of oil, more oil to stop it sticking. But if you have a good non-stick, just a little bit. All right, so we're going to start cooking the fish. Yeah. I'm going to turn my heat up a little bit, which is that one. There we go. And I'm going to have to cook these in batches. So depending on the size of your pan, you don't want to overcrowd your pan too much. There we go. Okay. All right. So you're going to cook those 2 or 3 minutes in each side. So while that's cooking, and you can, your sauce has been on for like 15 minutes now. So while that fish is cooking, I am going to taste my sauce and just check it for seasoning and see if it needs more salt. And again, this is just totally up to your taste. Okay. So your sauce should look, it's quite a thin sauce. It's not, it shouldn't be thick. It's good. It's got a good kick to it. Mine needs a touch more salt. So I'm going to add about half a teaspoon. So just taste yours and add what you think. And if your sauce tastes too, whoops, we lost the camera. Okay. If your sauce tastes too spicy, so if you taste your sauce right now and you're like, that's too spicy, I don't like it, put in a little bit more coconut milk, or like squeeze the half a lime, some lime juice in there, or like a teaspoon of brown sugar. So all those three, try one and then taste it again and try another. So all those things you can do if you think it's too spicy for you. But your sauce is basically now ready, and that can just stay on a low heat until everything else is cooked. And my fish is cooking. Those can probably, yeah, they can go to higher heat. And then your chicken, again, you're going to cook your chicken a little bit longer than fish. If you're cooking chicken, it's just going to take longer than your fish. So where's that fish? The blue. Yes. You know, I'm going to defer to Lynna for tofu because I have to say I've never cooked tofu in my life. I don't like it. Lynna, how long do you cook tofu for? 5 to 6 minutes per side for the tofu. All right, yeah, that's fine. All right. So my, oh yeah, so my fish has probably been in here for a couple of minutes. I'm just gonna have a look and see how it looks. It's not brown. I'm gonna leave it in there for another minute or so. So a lot of this is gonna depend on the type of pan you have, the heat that you're using, and the thickness of your fish or chicken. So you're just gonna have to judge it a little bit. But as I said with fish, when in doubt, undercook it, because you can always put it back in. So it's not a big deal. And once we've flipped it, I'll show you the trick to seeing if it's cooked or not. So I'm gonna turn these over, turn it up a little bit. Yeah. Okay, so this is just going to take a couple of minutes on this second side before it's ready. So I'm going to leave this for a couple of minutes. And the way to tell whether fish is cooked is, I need a 1 second. Okay. So when you're cooking your fish, when you think it's done, so in like about another 2 minutes, when I think this is ready, just get a regular knife, just a knife that you would be eating your food with, and you want to stick it into, I'll do it now because the fish isn't going to be ready yet. You just want to stick it into the middle of the fish like that and hold it up to your lip. I know this sounds weird. So if I hold that knife to my lip right now, the knife is cold because the fish is not cooked yet in the middle. And in about 2 more minutes, when I do the same thing and I stick that knife in the middle of the fish and I hold it up to my lip, it's going to be hot. It's not going to burn my lip unless I've left it in there for like, unless it's sort of charred, totally overcooked, which it won't be. And it's a weird way that does work to tell whether your fish is cooked or not. So if I'm just going to do that one more time, just wash this off. So I'm just going to put my knife in and touch that to my lip, and it's slightly warmer already. I think 1 more minute and that fish is going to be done. Okay, and then when with the chicken, if you cook chicken enough, just by feeling it when it's cooked or not. But use a thermometer, 160, 165 for chicken to make sure it's cooked through. And if you don't have a thermometer and you're not sure it's cooked, you can just take one of your chicken pieces out, cut it in half and just check and just look and see if it's cooked. And if it still doesn't look right, you can just throw it back in the pan. So it's not a problem. There we go. So my sauce is ready. I'm going to turn that off. And my peas, I think, are about ready too. Just going to check those. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So do you want to just check that your peas, they should be, depending on how big your pot was, they may or may not have come to the boil and be ready. And those peas, okay. I'm just going to go back to my fish right now. My fish, this is definitely done. So before I do my next batch, I'm just going to put this onto a plate. Do we have a dinner plate? Oh, there we go. Perfect. Okay. So this is my fish, which is done. So I'm going to take that out. There we go. Okay. And then because I'm doing, you'll see in my pan, I'm going to do 2 batches. And you'll see I've got some like burned panko breadcrumbs in the bottom of my pan. So I'm going to wipe that out with a paper towel before I do the next batch, because otherwise I'm going to end up with burned breadcrumbs with my next batch. So again, just be careful as you do this because you've got a hot pan, but you can just use a paper towel just to wipe it. I'm just going to pour that into my compost bowl. And again, if you have a nice, see that non-stick pan is now clean, and I'm going to put a little bit of that grapeseed oil that I poured too much. Just going to pour a little bit more of that in there and do my second batch of fish. There we go. Okay. And Lynna's cooking our chicken. Chicken's going to take a little bit longer. So probably by the time I've done 2 batches of fish, the chicken will be ready. Oops. There we go. All right. Yeah. Just take it out of the pan, because if you leave it in the pan, it'll keep cooking and overcook. Take it out of the pan and just put it onto a dinner plate. Just on a plate so that it stops cooking. No, don't. You're going to put the sauce on the plate. So when you're ready to serve, you're going to either serve on dinner plates or bowls, and you're going to put your rice, the fish, and then you're going to spoon the sauce over the fish, and then just have the peas on the side. So my second batch of fish is cooking, and I'm just going to drain my peas while that's happening. Second. Okay. Yeah, so you're just going to put. Oh, okay. Yeah, so just to serve. So if those of you who are ready, you may be finished with your fish. To serve it, you put the rice on the plate with. Well, I can show you a little bit now. Can you pass me a plate, Lynna? All right. So this is how you serve. So I'm gonna actually let me just get the peas ready. 1 second. All right, so my peas, I've just drained the water off, and I'm just going to toss the mint in there with salt and pepper. Salt. Sauce is ready, yep. And a little bit of pepper in there with the peas. And I'm going to put just a little bit of butter, because why not? Because the sauce will be done now. If it's cooked for 15 or 20 minutes, it'll be done. Sauce will be done. So there's your peas. Just toss that with salt, pepper, fresh mint, a little bit of butter if you want that. Those are ready to go. And then I'm just going to show you, I'm going to serve up 1 plate so you can see what it looks like. And, okay, whoops. I keep an eye on my fish. So to serve it, I'm going to put together a small portion. You've got your rice, and then you put, yeah, can you turn it over? Then you put your fish over the rice, and then get your sauce. 1 second. I just need to move this spot. I'll do that. Okay. 1 second. Yeah, turn that heat down to low. Can you? Thank you. All right. Lynna, do you have a soup ladle? Or actually, no, I can use this cup. That's fine. Okay. So you want to scoop your sauce over the top and just pour that over the fish, just like that. Now these curry leaves you can eat. Some people prefer not to and just pick them out, but you can eat them. The bay leaves you don't want to eat. So if you've used bay leaves, lime zest, and the whole clove, that you just want to just pick those out as you're eating it. So that's your dish. And then you've just got your peas and fresh mint on the side like that. So there we go. So if you've got fish, you may or may not be done. And your chicken, you're probably a little bit more to do. And that's it. So any questions anyone has at this point? Courtney, thank you, Courtney. Courtney's birthday girl is cooking with her crown on and looks very birthday. She's doing her birthday dance. Thank you. enjoy. Probably the hottest day of the year to have a curry, but hopefully it will taste good.
Thank you so much.
All right, is this ready? So our fish is all cooked. So let us know how it turns out, everybody. And hopefully you'll all have some leftover sauce that you can just stick in the fridge or the freezer. It'll last in the fridge for a week and freezer for a few months, and you can just use it to put on anything else. There we go. All right. Enjoy, everybody. Lynna, do you want to?
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Enjoy.
Thank
Have fun.
you.
Thank you.
All right. Take care.